A brilliant exercise in intellect and imagination. That appeared in the starred review of our next guest, Elizabeth Gilbert. She wrote the famous book, Eat, Pray, Love, and she's out with her brand new latest best-selling book called The Signatures of All Things. Elizabeth, it's great to connect again, and tell us, where did the title come from?
Well, the novel that I've written here is a big, sweeping 19th century epic novel about botanical exploration. And the title, The Signature of All Things, comes from an ancient botanical and mystical theory that was posited by this crazy German thinker who believed that God had hidden in the design of every plant on earth some clue to mankind as to that plant's usage. And I feel like all the characters in my book are also sort of seeking the signature of all things. They're seeking the hidden code behind the natural world.
Now, Elizabeth, I love that word botanical. So where were you around the world that it struck you that that just might be the great genesis of a book?
Actually, I was at my home in rural New Jersey when it struck me because I have recently settled down in the country and I bought a house and started making gardens. And I grew up on a Christmas tree farm. My mother was a master gardener. Botany is kind of in my background. And I knew that whatever I was going to write next had to be about plants because it was the only thing that was exciting to me at that moment in my life. But I knew that writing a big gardening novel would, maybe not be particularly thrilling for the reader. So I had to reach back in time into the 19th century at this moment in the age of exploration and the age of wonder, when people were traveling all over the world and risking their lives in the botany trade. It was sort of the action-adventure moment of plant history.
How interesting, because I also know that New Jersey is called the Garden State.
Yeah, it's called the Garden State for a reason. I mean, there's the New Jersey that we all know and mock. It's a punchline. I'm aware of that. And then there's this whole other part of New Jersey that's rural and beautiful and rolling hills and incredible farms. And I live in a small Victorian village of only 1,000 people that's surrounded by really amazing farms. And we do have the best tomatoes in the country. Just saying. So
were some of the intriguing storylines in the book found out in your garden working on your flowers?
Yeah, they are, but I think the bigger lessons in the book are sort of lessons of my own emotional journey. People who know me from Eat, Pray, Love know that I'm a seeker, and my character in this book, Alma Whitaker, is also a seeker, although she's a scientist. She's less mystical than I am, but she's taking on the really central questions of existence. What are we here for? What is life? How is it made? How do you get over disappointment? How do you find purpose in your journey? How do you find the courage to face the things that you need to face? And so I think there's more of me kind of in Alma's emotional DNA than there is in the plant history.
Elizabeth, I've seen you on TED Talks talking about purpose. Share with us how you found your purpose.
Well, I'm lucky enough that I felt from very early childhood like I had a calling. The only thing I ever wanted to be, the only thing I ever wanted to do was to write. And so that makes life simple in one regard. And I was lucky enough to be raised by people who are really self-sufficient and who set a model for me that you don't need to ask anybody's permission to go out in the world and do what you want to do and make what you want to make. And so I sort of set out from a really early age to become a writer. My obstacles in life that got in the way of that were just like the emotional things I had to clear out, like learning how to have healthy relationships, learning how to not invent dramas that distracted me from my true path. And it took me kind of into my mid-30s to really sort that out. But I think it takes a lot of us that long. And it's, not to say I have everything sorted out now, but I've certainly got a lot better about not getting in my own way.
Elizabeth, we celebrated with you last time your marriage and then the best-selling book, Committed. So have you found being married harder or easier to write?
Once I got married, oh no, this is a really nourishing marriage. In fact, with this particular book, it helped enormously because I did something I've never done before, and it sort of speaks to the level of intimacy and trust that I have in my marriage as well. But every night, my husband would come upstairs into my office while I was writing this book, and I would read to him what I had written that day. And it was almost like Scheherazade, telling a story to her husband, but without the life or death stakes. And thank goodness. And he would just sit there with a glass of wine, and I would read him, it was almost like a Victorian serialization. I would read him where we were in the story, and at the end of every night, he would say, what happens? What happens next? What's going to happen to Alma? What happens to Ambrose? What happens to Prudence? And that energy of his desire to hear the rest of the story is what fed the narrative. And I think it made the book more exciting because I didn't want to slow down the sort of galloping pace, and I wanted to keep him entertained. And I hope that that shows on the page for other readers as well.
Elizabeth, you have this unique gift of being able to relate to all of us through your words. Where do you think that originated?
Oh, thank you. I'm delighted to hear that. I don't know. I mean, I think I'm a pretty representative human being. You know, I think the stuff that I love and fear and want and need and desire are probably pretty similar to the common human experience. And I also just, you know, frankly, I really don't have that much of a filter between myself and the world, whether it's receiving or giving. And so maybe what people are getting out of that is just this sort of open-hearted pouring, you know, that I try to do with my own enthusiasms, and you know, I try to have a sort of like heart-to-heart connection with the reader, and if people feel that, then I'm really grateful, and I feel like I've done my job.
And Elizabeth, it's such a treasure to talk to you again. Congratulations on the book, Signature of All Things. But let me ask you, given your success, what have you learned along your path that you can share with the rest of us as we pursue our dreams?
The biggest advice I always give to people is don't self-reject. I know a lot of people, and I have to say, unfortunately, a lot of women in particular, who they make work but they won't put it into the world, or they have dreams but they won't put it into the world because they feel like it's not perfect yet, or that it will be rejected, or that they will be criticized. And I always say, like, don't withhold it. You know, don't edit yourself, you know, throw it out in the world and let them reject you, you know, but that's their job, you know, their job is to reject you. It's not your job to reject yourself. So I'm always telling people to sort of not be afraid to push it forward and throw it out there. As my husband always says to me, you know, we're only here for a little while longer. You know, what else are you going to do? Don't hold it in. Just, you know, put it forth, put it out there.
Well, Elizabeth, we're so glad you pushed it forward because we are treasured with yet another gift from you. Thank you for this great novel.
Thank you so much. It means the world to me to hear that. Thank you.